In 1945, the war ended, and the men who won it made a quiet decision. They would not be putting certain people on trial, not because those people were innocent, not because the evidence was thin, but because what those people knew was worth more than justice. This is the story of Unit 731, the largest biological warfare program in history, and the deal that buried it. In 1932, the Japanese army had a question: could disease be turned into a weapon? A surgeon named Shiro Ishii had an answer. He believed it could. He believed it would win wars faster than any bomb, and he believed the only way to find out was to test it on people. Ishii was not a criminal hiding in a basement. He was a graduate of Kyoto Imperial University. He had studied in Europe. He wore a uniform covered in medals. He had the full support of the Japanese government, and in 1936 they gave him exactly what he asked for: a facility built in occupied Manchuria in northeast China, 6 square kilometers, 150 buildings, its own railway line, its own water supply, its own prison from the outside. It looked like a water purification plant that was the cover story inside. It was something else entirely. The prisoners who arrived there were given a name. The Japanese word was maruta. It means logs. The work began immediately. Ishii's team wanted to know how diseases spread, how fast they killed, how much exposure was needed, how the human body responded under conditions no ethical researcher would ever be allowed to create. So they created them. Prisoners were infected with plague, with cholera, with typhoid, with anthrax. Not to treat them, to watch what happened. Frostbite experiments were conducted outside. In winter, prisoners had their limbs submerged in ice water or left exposed until the flesh froze solid. Then the researchers documented the damage, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Pressure experiments were conducted in sealed chambers to find the point at which the human body could no longer survive. And when the researchers needed to examine the results precisely when they needed the organs undamaged by the dying process, they did not wait. They operated on living prisoners without anesthesia, because anesthesia would have changed the data. At least 3,000 people died inside that facility. Some researchers placed the total across all Unit 731 operations closer to 10,000. The victims were mostly Chinese civilians, Korean prisoners, Soviet prisoners of war, a small number of Allied soldiers. None of them had agreed to be there. None of them were told what would happen. None of them came out. August 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, and Unit 731 had hours to disappear. Ishii gave the order. The buildings were blown up. The remaining prisoners were killed. The animals were released into the surrounding fields. The staff were scattered across Japan with instructions: never speak of this. Never write of this act, as if this place never existed. Ishii himself flew home to Tokyo, burned his files, and waited. The Americans arrived shortly after. They found the rubble. They found the survivors in nearby villages. They found enough to understand what had happened here. And then something unexpected occurred. The investigators sent their reports to Washington, and Washington made a calculation. The Soviet Union was now the enemy. The Cold War was beginning. Biological weapons research took decades, and Shiro Ishii had just spent 9 years doing what no American laboratory would ever be permitted to do. The data existed. The results existed. The men who produced them were alive and available. So in 1947, American officials met with Ishii directly. They offered him something extraordinary: immunity full and complete. No trial, no charges, no Nuremberg for Unit 731 in exchange for one thing: everything, every file, every result, every chart, every documented death. Ishii agreed. The files were transferred to Fort Detrick, the United States Biological Warfare Research Facility in Maryland. They were classified immediately, and they stayed classified for nearly 5 decades. Shiro Ishii returned to civilian life in Japan. He opened a medical clinic in Tokyo. He treated patients. He lived quietly. He gave occasional interviews in which he said very little. He died in 1959 of throat cancer, in his own bed, uncharged, untried, at peace. His colleagues spread across Japan's post-war institutions. Some became professors at respected universities. Some joined pharmaceutical companies. Some rose to lead hospitals. One became the director of the Japan Blood Bank in 1949. The Soviet Union held its own trial. 12 members of Unit 731 were convicted. Sentences ranged from 2 to 25 years. All of them were released within 6 years. The American files stayed sealed in 1993. A historian named Sheldon Harris spent years filing requests under the Freedom of Information Act. The documents were finally released partially. Many pages still redacted, many files still missing. The full record has never been made public. The Japanese government did not formally acknowledge Unit 731 until 2002, 57 years after the facility was destroyed. There has been no formal apology. There has been no compensation. The site in Manchuria was eventually turned into a museum, which the Japanese government does not officially recognize. We have a word for what happened at Nuremberg. We call it justice. We have a word for what happened to the doctors who experimented on prisoners in Nazi Germany. We call it accountability. Unit 731 killed more people, ran longer, operated on a larger scale, and was more systematically documented than most of what was prosecuted at Nuremberg. The difference was not the crime. The difference was whether the winners needed what the criminals knew. The men of Unit 731 were not protected because they were innocent. They were protected because they were useful, and useful, it turns out, looks a great deal like innocent when the right people are doing the looking.